So for today's training tip of the week, we're going to talk about stage one due diligence or stage one research. When me and Shay first got started, we had to kind of go through a lot of trial and error. There wasn't a lot of information when we first got started, a couple of old books written in the 80s and 90s. And so we had to figure out a lot of this on our own. And as we started doing it, we ended up creating, our own steps. This is what we need to do first. Here's what we need to do second. And as we started working with students, we eventually developed our 3 stages of research or 3 stages of due diligence. And so, in this process, stage 1 is what we call basic research. Then we go through stage 2 due diligence and stage 3 due diligence. And through each one of these steps, we're disqualifying property. That way we're not wasting time. So what we want to do is we want to go through what we call basic research. This is kind of the first steps that we're going to go through as we're looking at a property.
Yeah, stage one basically covers from our initial, finding or finding of the property to qualifying it for stage two, or basically making sure that it meets all the requirements to continue doing more research and to continue investing time into it. That's really what we're trying to do is we're trying to qualify the property for investing more time and effort into. And so, but yeah, like Steve was saying though, it's always been there's always been a learning curve here, because wasting time is such an easy thing to do with tax sales. And at the same time, you're trying to do research on properties, but you don't want to waste your time, because you can certainly waste a lot of time doing research that's unnecessary. So, yeah, I think it always has been a fine balance. And what we try to do is we found that we can gather this information, most of this stuff, very quickly, almost at a glance. And so the steps, into this process can go sometimes very quickly. I mean, a lot of times we can go through stage one due diligence within a matter of a minute or two on a property, and kind of know whether it's going to work, and basically, go through each one of these steps. And then we might go from it directly into stage two, just to see, to continue qualifying the property here, and to make sure that it's going to work. But we're going to talk about each one of these steps here for what qualifies here as stage one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in each one, we're going to be eliminating property. So we may only get to step 1 before we eliminate that property. So everything we're trying to do is save time, because you can waste time with tax sale investing if you don't have a systematic approach. So the first thing we're going to do, and me and Shay had to learn this the hard way, now it's becoming easier with online auctions and things, is check to see if the property is still available. Many times they would go ahead and put out a list, and they may update that list every day. Maybe they'd update it once a week. And now with online auctions, usually they're submitting them, daily, if not weekly, to update any of those lists. But what we don't want to do is look at an old list, especially if we're downloading that list, and then expect and start researching property off that list without going and looking to make sure that there's a new list. We spent hours researching property that were no longer on the list, that we could have went back and got the newest list and determined if that property was still available or if it deemed or not.
Yeah, another reason why we want to go back and verify availability is because it usually takes us back to the source of the list where we're going to open up the records for it. Or there's usually a link somewhere there for the property assessment or some kind of county record on the property. And that's what we want to be able to see. So we want to make sure the property is still, included in the auction, and then we need access to that record. And so as soon as that record pulls up, we're going to be able to determine a number of things about the property. If we're just looking at on the list, all we may be able to see is maybe what the starting bid amount is. Maybe there's a lien number or something like that. But what we need to do is we need to look at that county record in order to identify what the property attributes are, so we can figure out whether it has potential to work or not. So in some cases, we have to look up parcel search tools. But in many cases with auctions now, the links are automatically there with the auction list. And so in either case, we need to pull up the property assessment so that we can determine what the county information says about the property.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to go ahead and look over and review that county record information. We're going to look at the assessor's information, which we'll do here online in a minute, and determine, is this a property that we're going to want to avoid? We may look at that assessor information and automatically determine, hey, look, I can see the dimensions on here. This lot is too big, too small. It's a thin strip. Then we don't even need to move on to step 3. But based on that assessor information, if the property looks good, then we're going to go down to step 3, which is to research the GIS maps. Now, with structured properties, this isn't as big a deal because there's going to be some type of address that we can attach to it. But for land investors, and we have a lot of students and members that do invest in land, the GIS map is one of the biggest tools that has made land buying easier, more accessible, and better. We're better able to do research on each one of these properties because of all of the different filters and layers and maps that are available on the GIS maps.
Yeah, so initially when we first look at the county records, essentially what we're trying to do is if all we know what the opening bid amount is, we're trying to figure out what the property's value is and what it is, so that we can kind of compare the opening bid amount to the property value and see what what kind of potential is there. What is the opening bid to value ratio? I mean, is the property opening up for 5% of value, for 20% of value? That's something that we can tell pretty quickly just looking at the numbers and what it is. But from there, yeah, we can go into the GIS map here, which is going to tell us all of this information here. So accessibility, zoning, size, drainage features, sometimes easements that can tell us about there, depending on the GIS map that we're using. But it's not the only map we want to use, because the next step is to use the information that we've gathered here so far. So if we have a property address or if we have the nearest cross streets, then we're going to pull up Google Maps and we're going to try to locate the property on Google Maps. And the reason we're going to do that is so that we can see if we have any street side images of the property that we can use or go off of. The street side images are different just from an overhead map, because from street side images, we can tell things about the property and what is happening there at ground level that we simply can't, from an overhead image. And so that street side image is going to help us understand what the property is better, what the condition of the property is. And so it can play an important role in this stage of research. We're just gathering information at this point and looking for things that might disqualify the property. And so we'll go from into Google Maps and look at the property there to see if we missed anything in the GIS that might disqualify the property, or to see if the street side images tell us more or help us learn more about the property.
So once we've gone through and we've researched the county record, the assessor information, we've researched the GIS map, we've done the, we went ahead and checked the Google Street View, the Google Overhead View. Then what we're going to do is we're going to check the property value. And there's really 4 different ways that we're going to do that. First of all, we're going to check the county assessed value, which we saw there in the assessor information. Then many times, if it's any type of structured property, we're going to check both Zillow and Redfin. We want to get an idea of what do they think that the property is valued. Now, we're never going to trust that as absolute, but at least gives us an idea. So we can look at the assessed value. Is it close to the Redfin and Zillow value? Are they close together? Is there a big spread between them? All of that's going to tell us, at least give us an idea of what the property value is. Now, for something like a piece of land, we may not be able to check exactly what that Zillow or Redfin value is if it doesn't have an address. But we can go ahead and use that tool to check that street and see what's sold property and for sale property around there. We're not spending a huge amount of time. We're going to do a whole comparative market analysis later on in stage 3 due diligence. We just want to back up that assessed value and make sure, okay, this property does have value. It makes sense for me to spend more time researching it.
Yeah, if we knew the value within 10%, that would be close enough. It doesn't have to be exact at this stage. We just need to know enough to make a judgment on the property, whether it makes sense to continue moving forward with it, whether the numbers work or whether they don't work. But again, not investing too much time at this stage, which is why we use simple tools like Zillow or Redfin to pull value on it. We'll put more time into the property here later, but we need to know the baseline of what we're working with here on the bare numbers and what it's estimated to be worth here, so we can know whether we're going to continue into the next stage. But the last step here in stage 1 due diligence is to check for risks and holding costs. So what we're looking for here is if everything with the property looks pretty good. You know, the value of the property, it looks pretty good up to that point. Then what we're looking for are any things that may stick out or be red flags for us. You know, so what different types of red flags could be? Well, it could be lots of things. It could be something like a property owners association that has high costs or fees you'd have to pay every single month. That's not the kind of thing you'd want to be surprised by. You know, in fact, you kind of want to know what the general property taxes are in full, which you kind of get an idea of when you are looking at the opening bid amount. You know, because they're just taking past due taxes here, and so it's a number. You know, how many years they're dealing with here. So we can get an idea of what that is, but we really need to know before we buy the property, we need to know what it's going to cost just to own the property every year so we can account for that. But beyond that, we're looking for any obvious risks, like for instance, liens against the property. Are there any government issued liens that exist against the property? That would be something we wouldn't want to get surprised by. And so we can check for something like that. A lot of this, though, is more obvious risks. So you know, when we're looking at the overhead images, look for signs of drainage or problems that might exist. You know, look for things, you know, that could be potential issues or problems. You know, that you can tell. You have to kind of deduce or deduct, you know, things about the property from, you know, from information you're gathering from different sources.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, really, we're kind of going through this whole process doing step 6. You know, we're looking at any potential risk as we look through the assessor record. We're looking at any potential risk as we look at the GIS map or as we look at the Google Street View. You know, as we're looking at the Street View and we can see that, hey, a year ago, this Street View shows that this home was, you know, has the windows open and the door open and nobody's living there. You know, that's probably a home that we're going to go ahead and avoid. And so, you know, we're eliminating them by using these different online tools. So what we're going to do now is we're just kind of going to go through and do stage 1 due diligence. Now, the things as far as the government liens, and that's really something we're going to research in stage 2. And even the HOA fee or something like where we need to contact the city because of a city lien, we're going to be doing that at the end of stage 2 as well. We just want to get an idea. Okay, this is an HOA, so I know that there's going to be an HOA fee, get an idea of how much the property taxes are within that area, and then move on to stage 2 due diligence. But let's look at a couple of properties and kind of go through stage 1 due diligence or research.
Yeah, so let me enlarge this here just a little bit so it makes it easier for some of you to see. Okay, so we're looking what we can see. What's nice about this is we can see at least the opening bid and an assessed value. So that gives us the ability to see kind of what the percentage is or what the bid to value ratio is just at a glance. So we can see this one's a little over 10% here, you know, at 3,200 and being valued at 26,000. You know, we can see opening bid here at 16,000. With an assessed value of 189. So this one's a little under 10%. You can see that there's a link we can click on, plus there is an address that is right there. So if we want, I'm just gonna copy that. I always make a habit of copying it while we're looking at it. I'm gonna click on that link.
Yeah, one thing that was kind of interesting about that is you could see, you know, even in looking at, you could see one was probably a lot, one might have been a home, maybe you know, and then the third one you could obviously see it was some type of condo just based on the information there on the list.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes even basic stuff can tell us quite a bit about the property. So with this property, what we can see is physical street. You know, the address on the property is this 10105 Berryfield Court in Orlando. Let's see, no, not in Orlando.
Yeah, in Orlando.
Oh yeah, that's right, in Orlando. And looking at it, so it's not owner occupied. You know, the mailing address is actually somebody in Pennsylvania that we can see.
You can see the use is it's a townhouse. They've got it classified as a townhouse. We could go down there and look at a street view to see, but it may be like a twin home or something.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it. It kind of looks like it could potentially be one. Let's see, we can see taxation here, and then property taxes, how much they pay. So, yeah, it looks like it's about 3,300 per year. At least it's about what it's at right now.
You can see there's no homestead tax associated with it. And we kind of know that because it was an out-of-state owner. But if it was the same address, then we'd check to see, is there a homestead or not? And we also know, because if it was a homestead exemption, then the opening bid would be about 50% of the assessed value. So in this case, where it's starting at 16,000 and is worth more than that, you know, it's not starting at the it's not going to have a homestead.
Yeah, now I clicked on that there for the maps, and oh yeah, here we can see. So actually, it is like a duplex. Yeah, the way the lots are split there. This property here, you can see the lot outline there for it, and what we would do from here. So
It does have a kind of a bigger lot than some of the other homes in the area.
yeah, it does.
So we're going to go ahead and we looked at the county record information. We looked over the assessed value. Now we're going to go look at the Google overhead view. You know, we're going to look to see both on the GIS map and the overhead view, do we see any damage to the roof or anything like that? And then go down and look at the street view as well.
Yeah, which we could probably figure out the exact date here on it, but let's go down to the street side image here on the property, and we can see the images from July of 2013. So it's like a 10-year-old image, you know, not the newest. We would need to get a more current image here of the property. We can see though, it's a nice neighborhood, probably a great place to have income property. You know, and these properties all probably bring in pretty good or pay out pretty good rental incomes on all of these. And if we want to just get a quick idea here of value on it, so 273, and we actually have 10 interior photos here from when this property was listed or sold last.
Yeah, we can see it's 2-bedroom, look like 2-bath, and it last sold in 2018. So we know those photos are old. You know, they're 8 years old or so. So, you know, it's not going to look like this, or it may not look like this today, but at least we can get an idea of what the interior looked like at the time. And then, of course, we would do an on-site evaluation. We can see that it had central air and get an idea of what the layout is. And would also check it as well on Redfin to see, you know, is there a discrepancy? Are they pretty close? You know, the county record value. We're kind of doing that quick check of value on it. Everything looks pretty good on it. You know, 281, 273, pretty close. You know, it probably is valued somewhere in that, give or take 5 or 10%. And then
Now,
at that point, we'd move on to stage 2 due diligence.
now one thing we will notice is that its actual value looks like it's about 100,000 over what the county's assessed value on it is, you know, which they put it down there at 189. And so the bid value ratio on it is actually, I mean, the opening bid amount is even better than it was. You know, it was a little better than 10% before, you know, believing the value to be 189,000. But if it's valued at 280,000, then that $16,000 bid to value ratio starts to look closer to 5%, you know, bid to value ratio, which is a really low percentage to start with. Now that doesn't mean anything, you know, at least doesn't mean anything compared to what the property will actually sell for. You know, but it is just an initial indication of what the property numbers look like. You know, you can still bid the property up to whatever, but it's at least what we're looking at here with the information. And everything we see about this property here so far would make sense, and we would still move forward with it. You know, the value is there. We don't see any obvious problems or issues here with the property. No obvious risks either that we can see. I mean, everything with the property is pretty straightforward in terms of the records and the value. And so what we could probably do with this property would just be go right into stage 2 due diligence.
Yeah, exactly. Would, you know, determine the deed history, see what type of deed was issued, who the owners were, and then would take those names and would go back and look into the county recorder's office or the clerk's office to see, is there any government liens, what different type of documents could be attached to the property owner, and, you know, get an idea of what the liabilities may be in that area, and then go through and move on to stage 3 due diligence, where we're going to be, you know, getting on-site evaluations, determining what the actual value is, and then setting our high bid amount based on based on the research that we've done, how much we're willing to pay for that property. That could be 20 cents on the dollar, 10 cents on the dollar, 30. We can even show, as we showed properties today that were purchased at 40 cents on the dollar, that if everything is what it looks like, should be pretty good deals and is worth paying up in those type of circumstances.
Yeah, which we can get an idea for what's going on there with any of these properties if we, while we're looking into things like the value, of the property. So it's also when we might get in and look into the market in the area and see what it's like, how many properties are selling in this particular area. I think Orlando, I'm sure, has lots of sales that that are happening, but that's essentially how we would do it. Is we figure out, how what the property looks like here, what the market looks like, but really with stage one, we've basically done it. All we need to figure out with stage one is if the property is worth, looking into further. Is this a good potential investment? And all of the answers so far have been yes, yes, yes. Definitely. It hasn't had any problems there so far. And the numbers look really good. So we just kind of continue to move forward here with the research until we, find something that that disqualifies the property. Otherwise, we're going to go straight through the stages as quickly as we can so that we can assign a value to the property as well as a max bid.
Yeah, and once you got the hang of it, you can go through this pretty quickly. You can pull up that county record, you can look at it quickly as you kind of scan through the information and kind of move through these steps pretty quickly. So once you learn how to go through those steps and you practice it, it's going to become quicker and quicker for you so you can spend less time. What we're trying to do is we're trying to maximize time.